Welcome to a special edition of my podcast. What I thought I would do is draw together some of the podcasts in which we were discussing living with the film crew, living with Downton Abbey. Of course, there's one when Julian Fellowes kindly joined me in the library at the castle. And there's another one when John Gundill, our castle manager, discussed filming A New Era, which was basically a year ago. Isn't that extraordinary? And now you're going to be seeing it in the cinema. I thought we'd start this special podcast with, of course, Julian Fellowes, both a dear friend and extraordinary creator and scriptwriter of Downton Abbey. He has many other books, scripts and roles he's played in his life as an actor to his name, but I think he's always going to be remembered for Downton Abbey. And he begins to tell you all why he chose Highclere Castle to be Downton Abbey.
You know, this house has been part of my life for 10 years now. So it is always a slightly sort of a mixture of nostalgia and affection when I come down the drive and there's the house.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Because I remember when you and Emma came and stayed as our guests and friends before Downton. And there's almost a before Downton and after Downton in our life. And it has been the most amazing journey. And I'm so grateful that Highclere and George and I have been part of it. And it has, and I'm glad also that I hope it hasn't changed our friendship, because it's always challenging when you've got this phenomenal, which has sailed around the world into people's lives. And underneath it, a friendship of just 4 people. But to go back to the very beginning, which is a very good place to start, can I ask you, and I think people would love to know, why did you choose Highclere? Why was Highclere in the running, Julian?
Well, it was long before Downton, and I'd come here, I forget now why, but I was here for something, and I was looking around, and I thought, this is a marvellous house for a narrative, because it's very big, it's very impressive, it's very this and this and this, but it's tremendously straightforward. You don't get lost here. There's a very clear line of rooms around the hall, there's a clear line of bedrooms around the gallery, and there's also the added advantage that the door to the kitchens is in the saloon, it's in the middle of the house. So that whole side of the narrative is not going to get lost. And so I tried to use it for a version I was making of Little Lord Fauntleroy a long time ago in the 80s. And I can't remember now why it didn't work and we ended up at Eastner. But then again, some years later, when my writing career was getting going and I'd written a script called Gosford Park for the American director Robert Altman, and I wanted this house for that. But Bob Altman had a theory, because what he liked to do was cast star actors in all the roles. So they would have tiny parts sometimes, these leading actors and actresses. And that was his sort of signature, really. And he thought, whether he was right or not, that they would only do it if they could sleep in their own bed. And that meant that if they had a day off filming, it was really a day off, and they weren't stuck in some provincial town trying to see a movie. And so he insisted on a house near London, and we ended up at Rootham. Lovely house, actually, and it worked very well for the film. But that was why this time, with Downton, it was my third go, and it proved to be third time lucky.
Well, thank you, because I remember actually your wonderful wife, Emma, calling me on my mobile and saying, Fiona, there's something in the offing. And I remember that, and I thought, well, if I had thought that when I'd last seen her, maybe it was a raised eyebrow, but you're never quite sure what. It is extraordinary how you can have some sort of empathy. And then we got a call from a location manager. I remember you coming here and with Gareth Neame, who we've got to know well as well, which has been a joy. And you thought you'd found the perfect place at the first place you'd seen. But then tell me what happened.
Well, of course, it's rather like some people when shopping. I mean, I slightly have this with Emma, that she'll, if she wants to go shopping and she goes into the first shop and there is exactly what she's looking for, she can't buy it because that would deprive herself of the whole shopping experience. So she then has to go to 47 shops, none of which have anything better than the one she saw in the first one. And she comes back, and of course, sometimes it's sold. and I never understand that. My way of shopping is to go into the first shop, see what I'm looking for, buy it and go home. And the whole thing's over. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, a great success. But no, we then trailed off round practically every house in England. And then there was a moment, because it was set in Yorkshire, when it was going to be made in Yorkshire, out of Yorkshire Studios or whatever it was. And then we looked at some very nice houses, but then that idea died, and they wanted to make it out of London and have the studio side of it at Ealing. And finally, we woke up one day when we were doing one of the rounds of these houses and got down to breakfast, and Gareth said to me, "Do you think it's time we went back to Highclere?" And I said yes, and then that was it. And then we knew we were going to use Highclere.
Downton Abbey, A New Era, was of course filmed during COVID. It was made during April, May and probably half of June here at Highclere, where we were more or less still shut down. And John Gundill, our castle manager, shares with you some of the stories from behind the scenes about shooting in this very difficult and challenging time. It was a great achievement, and I really hope everyone's going to have enjoyed or enjoy seeing the film.
I spent more time this year than any other Downton filming visit, television series or the first film, in their unit base, because that is where...
Which, just to explain, is on our large coach car park.
Yes. I mean, it's where they set up all their various makeup lorries and costume lorries, and they have a whole production office up there. Each actor has their own space up there, catering up there. So it's their, literally their village, their existence. And I spent more time up there than ever previously, because I had to go up regularly to visit their on-site medical testing centre and see the nurses who would test us. And then I spent the next hour with a furiously runny nose. But, it was a small price to pay, and everyone had to do it. And it was very regimented. And that wonderful one-way system that we've all become so used to, you had to walk in one way and out the other way, and there were barriers, and woe betide you if you were in a hurry and tried to skip the barriers. And that was something that was very different this year. Barriers, arrows on the floors of marquees, no entry signs over there, and hand gel pots, sanitisers, face masks. Of course, when they're in front of the camera, the actors are not seen wearing face masks, but any other time, everyone, including those in front of the camera, that were to be in front of the camera, were wearing and complying with a very strict level of hygiene, which they had to. If you incurred a hole under the waterline with a positive test, the ship was gone. I don't know about any filming that took place away from Highclere. I'm not aware they had any challenges, but certainly at Highclere, the small cohort of Highclere staff that work closely and therefore came into proximity with the cast and crew tested regularly, as you've said. The cast and crew tested regularly. It worked. They provided a very secure environment. It was very different, because yourself and myself have seen the various series of television programmes filmed, and the first film, which didn't have to comply with any of this. But even the extra space that the filming logistical side needed, extra marquees and things, they went above and beyond the protocols that were in place to keep the show on the road, quite literally. And as we know, the film is in cinemas in 2022.
My God, can you believe it's another year?
Another year. And who knows whether there will be a third film. But let's get the second film into the cinemas, and I will certainly take my children, as I did with the first film, and sit in the dark back row of Salisbury Cinema and watch it.
With popcorn. I mean, I think I have been to the cinemas, in the last couple of months, and it is so nice having an outing and going to sit at a cinema eating popcorn and things. I used to probably go to the cinema once a week, and then I think in the last year or year and a half I've been twice. It is extraordinary.
Yes, and coming back to what I just said a moment ago about the challenges that people faced, obviously it was wonderful for the business at Highclere to welcome another film back. But from a social point of view, it was amazingly uplifting, and I saw it in the staff that had worked with Downton Visits and filming before. It was the first social interaction we'd had with people that we knew before.
Yes.
In that period of time. I haven't seen my parents for over 18 months, but I was meeting Downton people, who some of whom have been on it from the very first television series. So, yes, they're work colleagues and associates, but when someone has worked with you for over 10, 12 years, there is a sort of social appreciation, and I was able to see the Downton people more than I was my own family. So that was a great interaction.
It was
as well.
very early starts, John. I can't thank you enough. As you know, I'm not brilliant first thing in the morning. I'm slow out of bed. And you were amazing because you were getting up at 5 to get here.
Yeah, my alarm clock went at 5:15 to accommodate the mornings and the long days. I mean, it's an industry that works very hard and does very long days. And but we're used to that.
To create something that gives many people pleasure, I hope in this case, I'm sure it will give us all an immense amount of pleasure, and it's fun and moving as well. So much was shot at Highclere. I think Highclere will always looks beautiful. It's always my favourite character, which is always the question I'm asked. Which is your favourite character?
Yes.
Well, Highclere Castle.
Yes, and I mean, it is an art form, and I have no doubt it will look amazing on the big screen. But a lot of hard work went into getting it there, over and above the normal skills that every film crew brings to making a film. The extra layer this time being the extra distance people had to go to keep safe and keep the cameras rolling, which they did.
Before the films, the first one, and of course A New Era, there were 6 years of making a TV series. Throughout the whole of those 6 years, and in fact for both the films, the location director was a man called Sparky, or Mark Ellis to give him his proper name. It has been such a joy working with him amongst the other crew, and one of the funniest podcasts is the one with both Sparky and John and myself. So I would really recommend you listening to that in its entirety, but otherwise I really hope you'll enjoy this clip.
The first time I came here, it was a really cold, wintry, grey morning, and the house would just look dark and cold, and and it didn't look inviting. But then I came in the summer, in the spring when we started shooting, and the sun was hit the side of it, and it was just this lovely golden, beautiful house, straight castle. I thought, what an amazing place. And the fact is, every time I come here now, I lose count how many times I've been up that driveway. You normally shout at
too many.
You tell me off to go around the back, but and every time I come here, it's just like coming home. It really is. It's lovely.
But it's all the people, isn't it? Because every day started with the catering trucks and breakfast, and John and Diana Moyes, the housekeeper, would find their way up for their bacon sarnie, whatever else they were having, and be very courteous and polite in order to have their breakfast with you. Followed by myself on a bike ride with the dogs who failed to move on towards the bike ride, but would stop out the catering trucks, and then Gwyneth would later on appear, who was married to Don the gardener in her little mobile, little machine with her little dog to have a chat to everybody. There was a lovely rhythm to the days, actually.
It was fun, and it wasn't. Well, it was work. Obviously, it was work, but over the years, it just became fun. The characters: Eddie the gamekeeper, Keith in his red truck, Pat the painter. It was just. You got to know everyone, and everyone helped each other out. It was great.
And that came about as a result of the longevity of the show being based here, and it wasn't a passing seasonal visit, and that's how you came to know the characters and the people involved, and how Highclere came to know the Downton family, and then it all merges together. But what people may not understand that have listened to Lady Carnarvon's series of podcasts is actually what your role entails. I trust you can still go and do your shopping and not be pestered, whereas a lot of you may think, say, that's for other reasons. But a lot of people involved in the show on the other side of the camera, their lives have changed significantly. But the filming day and what people see on the camera, it takes a lot of work from your department to actually make that happen. And it is an extended day, as Lady Carnarvon's alluded to. There's certainly a good hour before the cameras start rolling and a good hour afterwards. But what are you doing as a location manager?
Certainly on Downton, I'm sort of the go-between between production and the house. Throughout the series, we'd obviously try and do things bigger, do things better, bring in big camera cranes, vehicles with cameras on. And trying to shoot in a Grade 1 listed building, sometimes we've got to be careful. It takes a lot of planning. You've got fantastic pieces of art. You've got statues, littered around the house. And
littered?
Well, not littered. They're wrong, you know what I mean. Scattered around the house. Sometimes, with camera cranes, these things are heavy. We have like camera dollies, big lights. The lights get hot, and if we're trying to shoot in the saloon, for example, or on the staircase, where we've had several issues over the years, haven't we? Trying to shoot on there.
Yes, because as you say, the staircase, I would say that there is lovingly and thoughtfully placed a statue, but it clearly is littered there.
Scattered, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And yes, all these considerations had to be taken on board. Once we got through those multiple meetings, our days were framed by the filming Bible that used to come out, that we used to have to sit down and go through. But I think our interaction was always going to be that of potential friction points, because you as production were trying to do something that inherently the building couldn't accommodate.
Yeah, we were trying to push it to the max.
And we then had to find a way to make that work.
Yeah.
And inevitably, my most used answer to you was no.
I'd even get to the stage now where they'd ask me a question and I would say, I'm not even going to put it to the house. I know the answer's no. But I think over the years, and I always think about this because I'm working on another show at the moment where they were asking me about breakages and did we ever break anything at Highclere when we were shooting there.
You did on the first day.
On the very first day in the library, and the blue chest fell off. It was bluey green. Turquoise, similar colour to yours.
Upside down, how about that?
Lady Carnarvon turned blue when she walked and found the
I mean, accidents happen.
It was on the very first day before we'd even shooting.
The funny thing was that my husband had walked round with Geordie walked round the night before and said to me, darling, should we leave this here, do you think? It's rather a beautiful little casket on the nose table, the one which John was hiding behind in the Kanye West scene from the earlier podcast. And I said, I'm sure it'll be fine, darling, it's part of the house. And then by 9 o'clock the next day, you dropped a camera on.
That was it. And I think, and I thought, oh no, we're doomed. But I think when you look back over the years, and bearing in mind, we went to 70 days and there was a crew of 80 people, 75, 80 people in the house.
On a normal
sometimes,
day. Sometimes a lot more.
If we had press or, another unit. It's a lot more people.
But, I think accidents happen. The only thing, there's one thing which will always remain with me is vaguely irritating. Do you think, well...
Was it the mahogany table?
Ironing the table.
Ironing the table. And then when the costume department said it wasn't us, I was like, there's iron marks on the table.
And you were in the front.
And we'd chopped it up to get it to the right height.
Of course, it's only right to conclude this special edition podcast with Julian Fellowes. And he gave us a little bit of a sneak preview behind the scenes, which again, I hope you'll enjoy. So many of your lines, Julian, have just gone into the English language around the world. And of course, one of them is, what is a weekend? And the way Maggie delivered it was just extraordinary. But when you wrote it, what was your thoughts behind it? What did you think? How did you think she was going to deliver it?
Well, I was really quoting from a great aunt of mine who told me the story that a very uppity young man had been trying to sort of impress her and brag about this, that, and the other. And he used this word, which at that time was not in general use among that group. And they used to talk about Saturday to Monday, even though it usually ran from Friday to Tuesday, but nevertheless. And it was considered a bit naff. And so she decided, of course she knew what a weekend was, but she decided to put him down by saying, what is a weekend? And thereby plunging a pin into his bubble. And when Matthew was banging on about being, I'll be a solicitor and I'll do this and I'll do that. And of course to Maggie's character, Violet, the mere fact that Matthew was sitting at that table at all was an insult and impudence in itself. It was ridiculous that he was inheriting this ghastly young man from nowhere. And so she was looking for a way to put him down. And when I was constructing the scene, this line came back to me. But where you get it, so it was so memorable, is in Maggie's playing, because she plays it under. She doesn't whack it out like a handbag or something, one of those shouty lines. She just drops it in. What is the weekend? And it was so funny that as she did it, I was there when they were filming that scene. And as she did it, I thought, I bet that lands. I never like to be overconfident, when people say, oh, this is going to do this. But I was pleased with that. And then again, as you were saying, it popped up on 100 million T-shirts. And I felt that was a sort of praise, really.
I often wonder, what is the genie in the bottle for Downton Abbey, Julian? And I'm not really sure I know where to start. Do you have any thoughts about it?
Well, obviously I have thought about this because I've often been asked,
Yes.
Why do you think Downton Abbey? Oh. And I have thought about it. But for me, it was an absolute moment of good fortune in the combination. I mean, when I was a little boy, I used to sometimes play at cooking in the kitchen. And everything, there were little grey lumps would come out of the oven, And then one day I made perfect eclairs. And my mother said, how did you do this? How did you make these? Of course, I had no idea. I just threw everything in and a perfect eclair came out. And I think that was an analogy, really, that we got the perfect cast. The house was absolutely ideal. The script seemed to work. The timing was right. The public, which is, very much what Peter at ITV, Peter Fincham,
Charming,
very much
yes.
what Peter Fincham at ITV had thought, that the general consensus that period drama was dead was wrong, and the public was ready for a new period drama they could get involved in. And I think all of those elements came together and made a hit show. So I don't think you can take out one bit and say that was the reason it was a hit. I think the music was perfect. We were very lucky with the costumes. On and on it went. We were pretty lucky with the weather. It just happened right.
It did, but I think it's all about the detail, isn't it? A sense of place and timing, and I'm incredibly grateful to have been part of the journey. I know Geordie is as well. And I think the whole team at Highclere has much enjoyed it. It's given this life and heart and optimism, actually, I think, has come through it.
Well, I hope it's an optimistic show.
Yes.
I mean, I feel that all of these people, even the ones you don't like much, they're all doing their best. They're trying, given the cards they've been dealt, like all of us, we're dealt certain cards, and you try to play them as well as you can. And I think that's true of Robert Grantham, and I think it's true of Mrs. Patmore. I mean, I think they're just doing their best.
I completely agree. I think there's also an underlying kindness and sense of community running through it. And I think particularly after the last 18 months, Julian, those sort of intangible qualities and assets in our lives, much of which has been stripped away, are incredibly important. We do all recognise that. So I think the appetite continues, is all I'll say.
Well, let's hope.
Well, we'll see where the journey goes. I'm not sure it's entirely finished, I have to say.
Oh, well, there's another mouthful we do know.
We do.
In the new film. And I hope people enjoy it.
I'm sure they will. I can't wait to see it.
Anyway, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this. I love this room. This room is one of my favourite in Britain. And I love the fact that we've made it even more famous than it was already.
I started the podcasts during the time of COVID, but I hope they've become a wonderfully interesting library of the real people and the real community here at Highclere. But today, the ones I've referenced are 43, number 41 and number 20 with Sparky and John. So I hope you enjoy what you've listened to today, and do have a look at some of the other episodes.